Cherchez la femme, look for the woman, is a French proverb which at some point replaced the old Latin aphorism "Qui prodest." Indeed, in the case of Napoleon, women played key roles in the emperor's crucial political decisions. One such woman was Polish Countess Maria Walewska. She gave birth to a son and gave Napoleon the hope of establishing his own imperial dynasty. It was thanks to Walewska's influence that Napoleon took to his bosom many prominent figures of Polish aristocratic emigration, forced to leave their homeland after the Russian Empire annexed Poland. Obviously, Russian Emperor Aleksandr the First regretted many times that his grandmother Catherine II was so cruel on the Polish state that it resulted in the Poles acquiring a great dislike of Russians in general, and for the Russian Empire in particular. Therefore, as soon as Napoleon gained international political recognition in Europe, the Polish aristocracy saw in him the opportunity to carry out its objectives. The first and main task was to take back Polish lands from the invaders, reunite them, and proclaim the restoration of the sovereign Rzeczpospolita, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. The second objective was to take revenge and punish Russia for the hardships it had caused.
І особливо є концепція
Polish General Michał Sokolnicki, an apologist of the idea to reconstruct Rzeczpospolita, had the concept of creating buffer states at the Polish and Russian border, particularly in the Baltics, also to restore the principalities of Polotsk and Smolensk, and to create the Chernihiv and Poltava principalities in left bank Ukraine. Moreover, he wanted to unite the territory of the former Zaporizhian Sich with Crimea in southern Ukraine and create so-called Napoleonida.
І цікавий момент, він ділив
Sokolnitsky divided and identified Ukrainians in a strange way as Tatars, Little Russians, and Ukrainians. Ukrainians are related to Poles, and he thought they could be assimilated, Polonized, and they should be a Polish ethnic group. He thought that Little Russians were descendants of the Cossacks, and because of this, they were similar to Tatars in terms of character. The unification of Little Russians and Tatars was supposed to become the social foundation for countering Russian expansion.
сіонізму російському.
Strangely enough, contemporary Russian propagandists actively use the chauvinistic rhetoric of Polish generals. They divide the nation into Ukrainians and Little Russians. Consequently, the supporters of Imperial Russia, just like Polish ideologists of Rzeczpospolita, believe that Ukrainians are incomplete Poles who live in western Ukraine, while Little Russians are undeveloped Russians and they occupy the main territory of Ukraine. These tales from 19th century Polish geopolitics took root in 21st century Russian state policy. Nevertheless, the Polish aristocrats in Napoleon's entourage did not have any special illusions about support for their ideas on Ukrainian territories. Therefore, they focused on ethnic Poles living in Ukraine. If we look at right bank Ukraine, the vast majority of the population really was serfs, and the vast majority of landowners were Poles. Napoleon was specifically relying on the Polish gentry, because Ukrainian peasants would hardly support the lords who owned them. In order to prove the seriousness of their intentions to carry out their plan, Polish generals, particularly Michał Sokolnicki, Józef Poniatowski, tried to persuade Napoleon to march on Russia via the southern pass through Ukraine. They attempted to gain the bridgehead en route, as the Polish-French forces occupied the majority of Volyn. In theory, these actions were supposed to provoke anti-Russian uprisings. Local Polish patriots even started to gather a people's militia. Tchaikovsky's detachment was made up of Poles who were supposed to spread the uprising throughout the whole of right-bank Ukraine. First and foremost, they were to target the Polish population, because it was the Polish gentry that wanted to restore Rzeczpospolita to the borders of 1772. Back then, Ukrainians treated their landlords negatively.
Тоді як українці ставилися негативно до своїх панів.
In other words, there was no anti-Russian revolt. Both Polish agents and supporters of Ukrainian autonomy showed themselves to be very weak. Hardly anyone was expecting Napoleon on our territories, and the emperor had to abandon the southern plan of attack. However, Polish patriots did not want to back down on their ideas. At least one document testifies this course of events, a map signed by Napoleon himself. It was brought from France by Aleksandr the First, a Russian general and later on governor-general of Novorossiya in southern Ukraine, as a trophy. It's the so-called map of Langeron, the Russia general. It was during the Russian army's foreign campaign against Napoleon that he found the map, which was allegedly signed by Napoleon himself. The map showed a plan to create two Napoleonidas, namely states directly dependent on Napoleon. One was to have been situated in the north of left-bank Ukraine and the other in the south. As a result, this map of Langeron ended up in the archive at Lviv University, where historians found it later on. So the map contains the established borders of New Europe and the names of its future rulers. In Ukrainian territories, only the Duchy of Lithuania is noted, which should have consisted of all northern regions of Ukraine. Marshal Louis-Nicolas Davout was to have been the head of state. The second satellite state, the Duchy of Volyn, was to have been ruled by one of the leaders of Polish patriots, Józef Poniatowski. It's possible that together with the already existing Grand Duchy of Warsaw, all three entities should have constituted the revived Great Poland, Rzeczpospolita.
Але Україна Наполеона, що називається...
Napoleon was not interested in Ukraine at all before the question emerged in 1808 to 1809. What should be done with Austria? Like something new should be there. And what should happen with Galicia? Napoleon concludes that Galicia should become part of the Austrian Empire.
До ідеї, що Галичина має війти до складу Австрійської імперії.
France obtained the majority of Polish territories after winning the war against Prussia in 1806 to 1807, and the Duchy of Warsaw was established. Duke Józef Poniatowski occupied most of Galicia when the Franco-Austrian War began. According to the Treaty of Schönbrunn, these lands still belonged to the Poles. Napoleon had to agree with that. Nonetheless, with other Ukrainian territories, the situation was different, as they were under the control of the Russian Empire, which was an ally of Napoleon at that time. That meant Napoleon tried to avoid any confrontation with such a powerful ally, despite the fact that Russia gave Napoleon reasons to challenge it. For instance, during the Franco-Austrian War, Bonaparte expected the Russian army to attack the Austrian army from the rear, but this did not happen. The Russian army, as led by Prince Sergei Golitsyn, remained on their frontier positions. Napoleon perceived this as Allied betrayal. That is why he saw Russia as a potential adversary even back then, though it could only become so on one condition: if the Ottoman Empire were to turn against Russia. The French emperor pondered for a long time the possibility of the Ottoman Empire's involvement in a war against Russia. In this case, the southern path, or so-called Kiev path, of campaign was considered a priority. Negotiations with General Horace Sebastiani, a French diplomat in Constantinople, were no accident either. They were held right up to August 1812, when Russia and the Ottoman Empire officially signed a peace treaty. And it was after this that Napoleon took the southern path off the agenda. The Ottoman Empire, Russia, Poland, and France were all significant geopolitical players that tried to win their political gambit by playing the Ukrainian card. Napoleon saw Europe as consisting of equal but not quite independent states. Neither Great Russia nor Great Poland fitted into this scheme, but Ukraine, on the contrary, was a key state in the scheme. According to Napoleon's plan, it was Ukraine that should have prevented the rise of Poland and closed Russia and the Asian prairies. It was because of this aspect that the beginning of the anti-Russian uprisings should have been initiated on our lands by Turkey. The French ambassador in Ottoman Porte, General Horace Sebastiani, also prepared the foundation for anti-Russian uprisings in Georgia and Kuban. He held active negotiations with the Cossacks of the Danubian Siege, which were to take the role of a strike group. At the same time, he demanded that Constantinople cut off the Bosphorus and Dardanelles for Russian ships and transferred the Turkish military contingent from Dalmatia to the Dniester River. The Nubian Cossacks should have entered Ukrainian territory first and raised a revolt so that Napoleon could then easily enter the territory of Ukraine. But at the time, the Danubian Cossacks were under Turkish rule. Notably, before the arrival of Napoleon, Turkey had waged a war against Russia in 1806 to 1812. It lost the war and so lost control over Bessarabia. Therefore, Turkey was not yet ready to enter a new war against Russia. At the same time, the Ottoman-Russian War of 1806 to 1812 was provoked by France as well. Such was the plan of the French General Staff, to weaken Russia and find a possible ally in Ukraine. It was back in the 1790s that two members of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the French National Convention, Jean-Louis Carrat and Count Boissy d'Angle, developed a plan to revive Ukrainian statehood in opposition to Russia's influence on these lands. General Jean-Baptiste Annibal, or Père Dubaye, was sent as an envoy to Constantinople. He had to convince Turkey to dispatch an expeditionary force to attack Russian ports in the Black Sea. Following this, the French Navy would join the expedition. All of these actions should have evoked popular and Cossack uprisings in southern Ukrainian provinces. French Foreign Minister Charles-Maurice de Talleyrand-Périgord suggested a plan in his letter to the Directory of 10th July 1798 to first attack Sevastopol and Kherson, and then the Russian fleet's resistance would be broken. There was a lot of talk about Napoleonida, in other words, the state of Buk Cossacks and Tatars on Ukrainian territory, including the Crimean Peninsula. We are, in fact, talking about the Yekaterinoslav Governorate. Despite the fact that it should have been named in honor of the French Emperor, it was regarded as an independent state. This decision was caused directly by the fact that Russian Tsar Aleksandr the First also actively made nice with the Poles as well. He planned to win over public opinion in the Duchy of Warsaw. And it was for this purpose that Prince Adam Czartoryski was sent to Poland. What was Czartoryski's main idea? He wanted to unite all the territories of Rzeczpospolita, those areas within the Russian, Austrian and Prussian empires, into one state entity, but as a Russian protectorate. In the letter from 31st January 1811 to his resident, the Tsar expressed the solution to the Polish question. Great Poland must be revived within its former borders, including right bank Ukraine. Specifically, it was this letter and certain other letters from the Russian Tsar that Adam Czartoryski showed to Józef Poniatowski. The aim was to win him over towards supporting Russia. However, having experience of the Russian Empire breaking its promises, the Polish statesman did not believe Aleksandr the First, but Napoleon. When European coalition forces crossed the borders of the Russian Empire, the Poles believed it was the start of the rebirth of Great Poland from sea to sea. Needless to say that there was no place for Ukraine in these plans. That is the topic for the next program. For now, remember that any event has its pros and cons, its own pro and contra.